So good afternoon, everybody. With my colleagues Jean-Marc Ménard, Aïcha Ranceux, and Élise Favrelière, we prepared a presentation to share with you some results of a work we've been conducting in France. And our presentation entitles Farmer Innovation Tracking, Exploring for Scaling and Changing. So first, some element of context and issue. So as we all know, farmers innovate in their own farming systems. Well, in this work, we explored the power of studying farmers' innovation for scaling out and changing research and development practices and representations. To do so, we developed an approach combining two methods, one coming from management sciences, called diagnosis of an innovation field, and one in agronomy called farmer innovation tracking. In which context did we implement this approach? We did it in the Vive les Bio project, led by Agrotransfert Ressources et Territoires, which is a French research and development organization located in the north of France. And the Vive les Bio project rooted on an issue shared by various farmers in the north of France, which is managing perennial weeds in organic catch crops facing the reduction in livestock surface area. When I speak about perennial weeds, I refer, for instance, to thistles. Well, at the start of the project, we posit the hypothesis that studying farmers' innovative practices could be a strategy to explore new ways to manage perennial weeds in organic farming. To explore this, as I mentioned before, we developed an approach combining two methods in agronomy and management sciences, and our work process followed 5 steps. First, we did a diagnosis of what R&D knows on the management of perennial weeds in organic farming. And this in the aim to be able to unearth innovative practices on farm. We then tracked farmers developing innovative practices through snowballing, and we conducted interviews with them in the aim to discover unknown practices. We then conducted an agronomic analysis of these practices, and finally, we identified new areas for investigation and innovation on that topic. And we also looked for scaling out this innovation through circulating agronomic content. In the following slides, I will present you each one of these steps and results associated to each one of it. So first of all, concerning the diagnosis on what is known for unearthing innovations. How did we do that? From the literature on the management of perennial weeds in organic farming, we did a diagnosis of what is known. And the first result of our work was to shed light on what we called collective fixations. That is to say that we identified that most of the research and development work is focused on 2 ways of managing this kind of weeds. We did a tree on the left of the slide, which presents these 2 ways of managing weeds, presenting main ways of managing weeds. So they are in green here in the tree. So managing perennial weeds in organic farming, acting on the weeds through progressive eradications, through rhizome fragmentations, and doing repeated tillage in summer. The other main option is managing perennial weeds in organic farming, acting on its environment, more precisely on growth and development factors, through competitions and introducing alfalfa in the crop rotations. Facing these results, we formulated what we called concepts to identify innovative practices on farms. That is to say, practices that would be different from these 2 main ways of managing weeds present in the literature. For instance, we looked for non-alfalfa management practices or no-till practices. And with this concept, we were able to identify through snowballing, as I said earlier, 11 farmers who developed in the north of France original practices. The next step was to discover these innovations on farms. So we did interviews with 11 farmers, and I present you here some example of practices we discovered. For instance, one farmer did trimming of the thistles heads, which once branch out and deplete root reserves, according to him and its observations. Another one developed an adapted tools, which he called the dock weeder. Some farmers considered that thistle was a source of useful biodiversity in their farm, And most of the farmers which we interviewed combined techniques in time and space to manage these weeds. The third step was an agronomic analysis of the innovations, which allowed us to produce knowledge, research questions, and to formulate concepts. Regarding the knowledge, on the example of trimming of the thistles heads, which one branches out and deplete root reserves, we looked for understanding this practice developed by a farmer. And to do so, we looked for agronomic knowledge already existing, which could allow us to interpret the observation of the farmer. For instance, we looked for a modeling on the known modeling on the evolution of rootstocks, which we compared with the observation of the farmers did on his own farm. And this allowed us to formulate hypotheses of relationship between an agronomic process, the evolution of rootstocks, and a technique, trimming of the thistle heads at a particular time of its cycle. Another production was research questions. For example, on this practice, we wonder, does the brushing effects of the thistle when the heads are cut always occurs, and in which conditions? And finally, we formulated what we called concepts, that is to say, idea, which we don't know at all, and we cannot formulate any hypothesis on it. For instance, a farmer considered that the thistles were a source of grazing for his sheep. We wondered then what could be domesticated animals that eat thistles. 4 steps, we then confronted what farmers said with what research and development knows, which allowed us to open up research fields to investigate. Most precisely, measure results was to shed light on implicit representations present in research and development work. One of them was to shed light on the fact that the perennial is always considered as a pest, while some farmers we interviewed considered they could also provide them services. Another one, implicit representation, is that in the everyday work, managing perennial weeds is most of the time considered with one technique, while most of the farmers combine techniques in space and time. These results thus shed light on new representation of what is managing perennial weeds, which opened up new research fields to investigate in the project. So as you can see on the tree, there were an evolution of the innovation field we were exploring. On the left, you can see the first tree, the green one, and on the right, the pink or I don't know, orange boxes represent the new research field which have been opened. So the project turned to an objective of what could be living with perennial weeds in organic farming, controlling perennial weeds as pests, as previously as it was at the first of the project, but also managing services provided by the weeds and managing combination of techniques to manage them. Finally, as I mentioned before, we also looked for scaling these farmer innovations, circulating agronomic content. Indeed, all the innovations discovered have been shared with other farmers, advisory services, and scientists through written testimonies, which are now available on the website of Agrotransfert Ressources et Territoires, through scientific productions, and we also use disruptive examples during design workshops with local farmers to give them ideas and to be able to allow them to design cropping systems adapted to their own situation. So to conclude, the approach we developed, combining methods in agronomy and management sciences, offers a practical way to explore innovative fields, starting from grassroots innovations. This work illustrates that innovation tracking can help identify and overcome collective fixation effects by shanking up agronomic representation, mainly inherited from history. For instance, we considered that weeds were only pests. And as I've shown you through the examples, this approach fosters the exploration of new innovation fields. Finally, this approach also contributes to scaling out local farmers' innovations as for instance by circulating testimonies and providing disruptive examples to be used in design workshops. So I thank you for your attention, and we thank all the farmers and the partners involved in the Vive les Bio project, led by Agrotransfert Ressources et Territoires, and we also thank all the OFE 2021 organizing committee, and thank you again for your attention.